Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Victoria Mwanza and I'm a Global Change Facilitator at BioPhorum. Today is the second in a series of webinars exploring the supply chain for cell and gene therapy products, looking at the insights, practices and distinctions to ensure successful product launches, sustainable, cost-effective supply chains. In this webinar, we will be exploring the MRP Supplier Relationship Management. Our guest speakers, Leslie, Tom and Ike, will be on hand throughout the webinar to handle any questions and give more context to any of the slides that you see today. There will be opportunity at the end of the webinar to register for the rest of the series. The third webinar will introduce the audience to materials requirement planning tools. The tool was developed to support new businesses, those developing teams or individuals new to the supply chain principles and practices. There will also be a link to the first webinar and the in-depth paper which the team wrote to supplement this set of webinars. In addition, at the end of the webinar, we will also host a Q&A session, and we've got a number of questions from those people that have already read the paper that we will also explore. So before we start today, I'm just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping. So during the webinar, if you could please mute your mics, it just keeps down the background noise and allows people to hear more smoothly. On the top of your screen, you'll see there's a chat function. We encourage you to add your comments, add your thoughts, add any questions. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. What we will do at the end of each segment is we will go to a Q&A where we'll go around and ask each of the questions. If you like the resource you've seen, or you want to know more, or you think it could be explored further, please use the reaction buttons at the top of your screen also. During the webinar, we ask you not to take screenshots or recordings. All information that we provide today will be provided at the end. Within 7 to 10 days, you'll get a full copy of the webinar. We really would like your feedback. Any thoughts at the end? Any thoughts of expanding these sections or how we could build on it further? The team would like to get this information from you, so please share that as well in the chat. So before we start, I'd like to tell you a little bit about BioPhorum. BioPhorum's mission is to create an environment where our members from the global biopharmaceutical and device industry connect, collaborate, and accelerate progress for the benefit of all. BioPhorum currently has 12 programs with over 150 members. By those members coming together and collaborating, companies are able to accelerate change better, faster, and cheaper than it would be for individual companies to do this on their own. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Supply Resilience Forum. So all the work that's been done today has been done as part of this forum. The vision of the Supply Resilience Forum is that the biopharmaceutical industry is considered one of the best understood, managed inbound supply chain of any industry in the world. To achieve this, the forum leaders and teams set out 5 strategic objectives. These were the inbound supply chain should be led by market insights, provide safety, resilience and quality, underpinned by end-to-end digitalization, open and transparent, responsible and sustainable. The webinar today supports this vision by contributing to objectives providing safety, resilience and quality, open and transparent, and responsible and sustainable. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Ike, who will present the next slides.
Hello, I'm Isaac Young, a supply chain professional with over 43 years of experience in the biotechnology and medical device industries. I have experience in small biotech startups as well as large commercial firms and have also worked on the supply chain for a supplier to the biotech industry. I have a multidisciplinary background in manufacturing, information systems, materials management, strategic sourcing, regulatory affairs, ethics, and operational resilience. I've been engaged with various biotechnology associations for about 20 years and have an MBA from Babson College. Next slide. Welcome to an introduction to supply chain for cell and gene therapy, webinar number 2. These webinars and the accompanying paper from which they are derived are crafted with the intent to provide some insight into the supply chain and related processes associated with bringing a new cell or gene therapy product into GMP production. It proposes disciplines that could begin being realized in early stage clinical activity that will help set the stage for a mature supply chain function that will support commercial operations. We will identify many practices that have been well established in biopharma and highlight distinctions of the more recent cell and gene therapy space. The intended audience for this work are professionals that may have been involved in disciplines other than supply chain, who are now tasked with implementing the supply chain processes. Supply chain professionals that are new to cell and gene therapy may also find this work informative. As we go through the webinar, and as you'll see in the paper, we begin individual sections with a visual representation of the product development lifecycle. These chevrons have been color-coded to represent what we believe you should begin, when we believe you should begin development of a particular discipline so that you can best optimize that particular discipline ahead of its absolute requirement and to avoid risk of cost or compliance issues later on. A green chevron suggests this is when you should begin working on that particular discipline. If you wait until the yellow chevron phase, then you're introducing more business risk at that point, such as higher costs or disruption to your timeline. If you wait until a red phase, you're introducing a potential compliance risk. That may result in an audit observation or other issue that will impede your ability to bring your product to market. And please note, we would like to make this a living body of work that will improve with your feedback. Please contact BioPhorum with your comments, questions, and ideas that will help enhance this work. Next slide. A link to the paper will now be added to the chat. Please contact BioPhorum if you have difficulty accessing the paper. I'm now going to hand over the presentation to Tom and Leslie to further discuss material requirements planning, a continuation from webinar 1, and its application in the cell and gene therapy industry. Note that both Tom and Leslie are live online to answer any questions in the chat function.
Hi, my name is Tom Walls. I'm an Associate Director of Supply Chain Planning at Spark Therapeutics, part of the Roche family. We have gene therapies in development and clinical stages and a commercial gene therapy product on the market. Keeping with our format of communicating optimal stage of development to implement these processes, we believe that these processes should be implemented during development. Having good MRP processes greatly reduces the risk of stocking out or not having enough materials to make changes per your project or operating plans. All industries which manufacture goods use some version of MRP in their toolbox to know what to purchase and when to purchase it. One quick note, during peer review of this content, a note was made that these techniques aren't specific to cell and gene therapies. That is true. These ideas and techniques have been around for decades. In the case of the materials requirement planning format we're going to review, or centuries in a few of the concepts we will explore. Compared to the incredible science we are exploring and implementing to better patients' lives, these processes are very simple. But many cell and gene therapy companies consider these processes an afterthought and leave executing these processes to folks who don't understand the concepts discussed in this section. While the processes are simple, they require organization, focus, and discipline to keep the inputs required for these processes and calculations as exact as possible to ensure supply of the critical ingredients required to manufacture a batch. There are 3 information sources needed for materials requirement planning. First, the bill of materials. Know all the materials needed to manufacture a successful product batch. Maintain a list with essential information for sourcing the materials. Next, current inventory with expiry. Keep track of inventory amounts on hand and the associated inventory status. Lastly, the master production schedule or high-level project plan. If a detailed master production schedule is not available when material planning starts, a start date and plan number batches can be used to get a jump on orders for longer lead time items and materials. Here's a look at the risks of not implementing MRP for any company. We can't understate the importance of supply of materials to support your manufacturer products. We all remember COVID and the state of supply chains during the pandemic. While we are thankfully out of that pandemic situation, the industry still grapples with very long and fluctuating lead times for many of the components we use. This was the situation before COVID-19. The pandemic exacerbated supply chain issues with existing material capacity issues. Those constraints largely still exist. But more than any other industry, our firms are much more sensitive to supply disruptions. The risks noted here are known to us all, but the role of inbound supply on these risks is often not understood. Having a disciplined MRP process and trained professionals who know these techniques is an important risk mitigation for any cell or gene therapy company. I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Leslie, who will look at some of these processes and techniques in a more detailed light.
Hi, I'm Leslie Varner. I'm currently a supply chain lead at Pfizer. I have 18 years of experience in the biopharma industry, with over 6 years being in material planning, sourcing, warehouse management, and logistics for clinical gene therapy projects. There are always challenges when planning, sourcing, or storing materials. These are three of the biggest challenges for CGT supply I have experienced. First, planning inventory of novel, custom critical starting or raw materials with an initial short shelf life of 12 months or less due to ongoing stability studies. Second, sourcing these materials can be challenging due to the supplier's manufacturing capacity constraints, leading to long lead times, and alternative sourcing may not be cost effective or a viable option due to project timelines. Third, CGT biological materials require ultra cold or cryogenic temperatures, so assessing storage capacity, implementing cold chain management, and risk mitigation are essential to prevent material loss. To avoid project delays, it's best to start planning all materials, but especially novel, custom critical materials, as early as possible. Working with suppliers to understand their manufacturing ability and schedule material deliveries based on suppliers' capacity and project need, accounting for internal timelines and potential errors in supplier or internal manufacturing as well. My presentation will go into more detail about materials requirements planning, or MRP. A list of materials needed for a project starts early in the development stage. We recommend a formal bill of materials, or usually referred to as the BOM, to be implemented for Phase 1. At Phase 2, the BOM list should be locked in with minimal material changes as the process scales up. It's important to keep a combined list of production material demands and some detailed information on those materials for planning, sourcing, and forecasting purposes. A typical analogy for biopharma therapy batches is to think of the production as if you're cooking. The batch records are the recipe with instructions, and the bill of materials are the ingredients captured or listed in the batch record. A BOM is the first information set collected to populate the MRP and should be stored in a database, spreadsheet, or inventory management system. A Word doc or PDF is not recommended. The material data will eventually be used to forecast future purchases, so the ability to extrapolate this information mathematically is important. The basic bill of material information needed is 1. The therapy or project that will use the material. 2. The item or part identification number. 3. The material description. 4. quantity needed, including the unit of measure. It is recommended that additional data is collected to properly source the materials and forecast demands. For example, lead times are not usually noted on bills of material. However, current supplier lead times are critical to knowing how soon an order needs to be placed with the supplier to support a material's planned use date. Supplier lead times generally account for time to complete several actions, including the order receipt, manufacturing, release, paperwork generation, and shipping and delivery. Lead times may change from month to month or even day to day. It's important to stay up to date on supplier lead times. We suggest getting lead time information from suppliers at least quarterly, more often if possible. This slide shows an example BOM list spreadsheet with some data points and information collected. The BOMs can be created early in process development and revised slightly over the life cycle of the product. The BOM may be dynamic to a point, but material demands should be locked in as early as possible prior to each stage or phase to allow for proper material planning and sourcing. The preclinical phase is an ideal time to implement tracking of inventory amounts on hand and expiry status. In phase 1, using expired material in clinical stage production becomes a compliance risk. Inventory status and batch tracking must be implemented by phase 1. Current inventory with expiry is the second data set needed to generate the MRP and determine if there's enough inventory to support the production BOM demands. These are the must-haves to keep track of on-hand inventory. 1. A unique alphanumeric code for each inventory item. Number 2. The batch lot number provided by the supplier or a unique internal batch lot number assigned at receipt of the material. Number 3. Quantity of the material in inventory with unit measure. And 4. The batch expiry information of the material. It's important to capture starting inventory to understand future purchase requirements. Keeping up to date with inventory can be daunting, but it is very important. We suggest having a lab support function personnel to perform cycle counts of physical inventory at least weekly to ensure inventory is accurate. The importance of accurate inventory cannot be overstated. It's an issue that all companies struggle with, but should be top priority for everyone within the organization. Inventory by batch, lot is equally or more important. Different batches of the same material will most likely have different expiration dates. The Master Production Schedule, or MPS, is key to keeping the production plan on schedule to supply clinical trials on time and meet critical regulatory filing dates. Therefore, Phase 1 is the ideal time to implement use of a Master Production Schedule. The third component to a basic MRP is the Master Production Schedule, or MPS. The MPS is a project planning tool that outlines the timeline and number of production or component batches needed to meet the finished product demand. This subsequently drives the quantity and need-by dates for the project's BOM demands. Some companies also capture maintenance and other activities that may impact resources and ultimately the production schedule. It's important for a material planner to have visibility to the MPS and review the schedule daily to stay on top of any changes in the production schedule that could impact the material quantity and need-by dates. Phase 1 is the ideal time to implement materials requirements planning. MRP is essential for internal material planning, providing demand and supply visibility for end-to-end supply chain efficiency. The MRP can also be used for communicating material need-by dates and long-term demand forecasting for improved supplier collaboration. As supply chains get more complicated and as demand for these critical materials expand, proper forecasting of material needs is paramount to successful development. Suppliers should be viewed as partners in a product success. Transparency to demand helps suppliers avoid long lead times or supply interruptions. And this collaboration and relationship building will support seamless, quick responses to the growing demand for materials as the project scales up. The basic MRP can be an active spreadsheet or database of current material inventory with status, demand based on BOM and NPS, incoming material receipts or supply, and remaining inventory. The available or remaining inventory is what is forecasted to remain after consumption is decremented and any incoming supply is added. An MRP spreadsheet template is being built and planned for release with or shortly after article publication. Current inventory is a collection of total available inventory per the inventory plus expiry sheet or inventory system data download. The MRP template that will be provided assumes that the user is tracking available inventory in either an inventory system with data download option or in a spreadsheet at least. Expiring inventory quantity for each item is pulled by month for the MRP. The MRP template assumes FIFO, first expiry, first out, so only the unexpired portion of inventory is remaining. Materials should be used prior to expiry and pulled based on the product quality and financial reasons. Best practice is to follow FIFO, not FIFO, which is first in, first out, for materials with expiry dates. This is primarily due to materials with different manufacture dates from the same or multiple suppliers that could potentially not be received in a FIFO manner. Total demand for the MRP is found by multiplying the total number of batches planned on the MPS by the quantity of material needed per BOM. In early development stages, an MPS may not be available, so a high-level project plan with number of planned batches may be used to forecast demand. There may be other material demands outside of the planned batches. Materials may be needed for qualifications, practice and engineering runs, calibrations, or other uses. These non-BOM demands can be difficult to capture and forecast. Incoming material supplies added to the MRP in the form of material order quantities and bucketed by month of expected delivery. As a part of the supplier relationship, need-by dates, including time for receipt, testing, and release, should be shared with the supplier. Regular and early communication of the need-by dates or changes to those dates, as well as the supplier planned delivery or ship dates, should be done to make sure a material supply does not stop production. By addressing potential issues early, such as a material delivery projected after its need-by date, most suppliers are willing to help find a solution, either prioritizing the order or finding an equivalent component that may be impacting order fulfillment. To actively address delivery issues, other sources for the material can be evaluated with the project team. Multi-sourcing or sourcing from more than one supplier can help mitigate risk of supply disruptions and dependency on a single supplier. Some important notes about the MRP. The MRP should have revision controls and should be revised periodically based on actual batches completed and materials consumed by those runs. The MRP will also change as projects or campaigns are delayed or moved up in the production schedule. Most times, batches are added to the production schedule to meet project needs or supplement product loss. Sole ownership of the MRP by a single individual person and accuracy metrics should be considered. It is extremely important to have a dedicated material planner and not someone performing this role as a side job. The MRP template assumes all demands are per the MPS and captured via the BOM. There may be other unforecasted demands, however, and the non-BOM demand estimate on the MRP template is provided to add this type of demand based off of historical demands or more often best guesses. It is strongly suggested that these demands are captured as precise as possible and added to a BOM. If non-BOM demands are much greater than BOM demands, and it's difficult to quantify within the template, a Kanban system for management of these items may be more appropriate. Additionally, safety stock and reorder points are also preventive measures to address unforecasted demands and unplanned increased material use. A Kanban or pull system is recommended for material demands that are difficult to forecast and often used in various amounts or as needed in production. Developed by a Toyota engineer, a Kanban system uses visual cues to prompt needed actions. Although electronic Kanban systems are available, the basic model is a physical visual card system. The cards have key information about the material, including a reorder point and reorder quantity. Based on historical use or best guesses, minimum stock levels are set as a reorder point, and a reorder quantity is recommended based on historical supplier and internal receipt lead times for the material. Once the visual material inventory reaches the reorder point, the user pulls the card to prompt a reorder for the material. The material is reordered based on the reorder quantity, and the inventory is backfilled once it is received. The system helps prevent waste or overordering of materials. Lower cost, off-the-shelf, not custom materials are usually ideal materials for a Kanban system. Safety stock helps protect the material supply from unexpected situations. The risk of stockouts and costs associated with not having adequate raw materials, ultimately stopping production, can be reduced by implementing safety stock inventory levels. Disruptions in material supply will happen. This is a good way to prevent stockouts or zero inventory situations for materials, especially with independent demand or non-inventory items. However, it does not consider variations in demand or lead time. Assumptions specific to variation in demand and lead time may also be necessary for maintaining an appropriate safety stock. The longer the lead time, the more inventory should be kept on hand. Some examples of varying supply are supply constraints due to suppliers' inventory shortage, initial supply protection issues when scaling up or scaling down projects, and struggles to accurately determine inventory needs during development of a new product. Other factors that could contribute to supply disruptions are natural disasters, labor shortages, or even maintaining inventory accuracy. To avoid a stock out or zero inventory situation, set reorder points based on average demand and average lead time, plus a safety stock inventory quantity to maintain supply of the material until a new order is received. The MRP template uses this formula with average demand and lead time in months, but weeks or days can also be used if the units of measure are the same. By implementing MRP early in the development process, where material demands are identified, material inventory is tracked, material needs are properly forecasted, and buffers for unexpected situations are implemented, there is a greater probability of continuous material supply for our life-changing therapy projects. It is, however, just as important to not have excess material occupying valuable storage space, impacting costs, or contributing to waste. Minimally, a 1-year review of unused or slow-moving materials should be completed with material users to assess materials on the BOM. Why are the materials slow-moving or not moving? Is it due to adjusted demand for the material? Update the BOM and MRP based on the feedback. There are many great tools out there to help manage inventory. Reorder points and safety stocks, as we calculate them here, are very basic. As inventory concepts such as available to promise or resurgence in just-in-time inventory management and tools such as artificial intelligence gain footholds in our industry, companies will move from these basic methods.
Okay, I'm going to move on for time's sake to Ike's presentation. Ike's got a fantastic presentation on supplier relationship management and some really insightful thoughts here. So, Ike, would you like to take over, sir?
So we're going to talk about supplier relationship management here and some of the processes associated with that. Basically, it's a more formal approach to the third-party interactions, which will be critical to your company's success. The extent to which your company's efforts are dependent on the relationship with your suppliers argues for an early focus on these disciplines. Procurement of the necessary raw materials and equipment, along with services which you cannot execute internally, are fundamental to your operations. Securing and optimizing the sources of these is paramount to the future success of your company. A common issue for early stage leading edge development environments is the relatively few, if not sole sources of the materials and equipment used for the production process. This evolution of single sourced and sole sourced materials presents a significant challenge to the cost and continuity of supply. Compound this with what will typically be exceptionally small volumes at this stage, and the result may be a supplier relationship that warrants more attention than just sending a purchase order and paying the bills. As you think about supplier relationship management, you can ponder a 4-quadrant view that weighs your strength versus supplier strength. You may find that despite being the customer, your very low volumes do not place you in the upper left quadrant here. If the material involved is a basic commodity item that is available from multiple reliable sources, then you might consider yourself in the lower left-hand quadrant. For critical materials and services, particularly at small volumes, it is often at the lower right-hand quadrant where you will find yourself. The answer to this is to work towards being in the upper right-hand quadrant so that the relationship between you and your supplier is strong, interdependent, and mutually beneficial engagement that affords a more predictable, lower risk source for your operations. Next slide. So you will not likely have the resources to invest the same effort for all your supplier relationships. So the first step in this process is going to be to segment your supplier base so you can prioritize those investments. This segmentation process will also serve as a good communication tool to align your organization internally and with the supplier to agree on expectations. The segmentation process is more than just a gut reaction to where a supplier fits in your supply portfolio. It often starts with a review of the amount of spend with your suppliers, but this is likely to be one of the least meaningful characteristics. Supplier performance is more relevant. A single source, sole source situation is an important characteristic to consider as well. The importance of quality and consistency in supply are often amplified with newer materials where all of the characteristics and specifications of the material are not fully understood. One could also include the opportunity of the relationship in the segmentation process. In other words, are there opportunities for innovation transfer that could be realized with a more collaborative relationship? One of the key takeaways from this is that you want to have fewer low-tier, high-priority suppliers, such as Tier 1 in this example, as these will be the relationships where you invest most of your time and resources. You define what operating mechanisms are appropriate, and you can be sustained for the higher priority suppliers to ensure the success of those relationships. Note this segmentation process is an important step, and it should not be done with a single vantage point. You need the rest of your company to be aware of and contribute to this effort because you're going to be asking for their time as well to support the relationship with those critical suppliers. Pool the perspectives of the relevant functions and periodically repeat this process to ensure there is alignment of the supplier prioritizations. Next slide. This is another example of how you can approach the segmentation process. In this example, you create a spreadsheet where you're going to assign a particular value depending on how you answer various questions within that spreadsheet. Again, don't do this in a vacuum. Collect multiple perspectives within your organization. Some may like this approach as it generates a tangible value that may help mitigate bias, and it documents the elements that give rise to the result. Note, if you establish revision control on this document and maintain the records of individual inputs, you can begin to develop a history file that could be useful in the dialogue with the supplier and your future strategy. Next slide. Business reviews. The business review is a very important part of supplier relationships. It's challenging, especially in times of limited resources and budgets, but it is a critical element of the supplier relationship and the necessary transfer of information that is going to drive value out of the relationship for both parties. It should be periodic and it should be formal, with meeting minutes and a project log action item list that needs to be followed. These meetings should occur regardless of the current status of the relationship. Even if everything is going fine, don't fail to have the business review. If things aren't going well, you may have even more business reviews, but it's important that this become a regular cadence for the relationship. The agenda does not have to be the same across all suppliers. It can be very much supplier specific, again, depending on how you segmented that supplier and what you procure from them. It may be different if you are dealing with them on a custom-made materials or specialty services. Different suppliers will have different horizons of focus. Some will involve more immediate issues, or while others may have a longer-term development focus. Common elements of the agenda may include transactional review of what has gone well and what could have gone better, particularly if you're using scorecards for the supplier. It is important that it is a two-way discussion. The supplier should come prepared with their review of the relationship as well, so the continuous improvement is collaborative. It is often a good idea to periodically bring in executive leadership from both companies as well. This builds awareness and commitment to the relationship. Next slide. Quality agreements. These are contractual agreements that are often not started at an early stage, both because of uncertainty and because your current volume or projected usage at that early stage isn't enough to engage the legal departments of both parties. They will, however, become an absolute regulatory requirement for some materials and services as your product gets closer to commercialization. As you can see, this is an extensive list of requirements that may be supplemented with further elements as appropriate. If your supplier has been in the pharmaceutical industry, then these requirements will not be a surprise. If they have not, you may find yourself working with them to establish their capabilities to meet these requirements. In many cases, there may be an opportunity to gain commitment to achieve some of these requirements pending the development of a quality agreement. Change notification is one example. It is important to gain awareness of any changes being made in the supplier's process or materials, preferably with advance notice so you can investigate and adapt to any impact on your process. Understanding how well the supplier manages their suppliers can benefit both your confidence in the material quality and the risk of supply. Auditing of the supplier's quality systems and insight into their regulatory status can help define what further efforts will be necessary for this to be a successful long-term relationship. There is an advantage to align with the supplier early on these requirements, as any gaps may require significant time and resources to become compliant. And there is an immediate gain in the understanding of where your supplier stands and what risks they present your supply portfolio. Next slide. Master supply agreements, like quality agreements, will more often come later in the development cycle, but they generally start off with a boilerplate of standard elements such as business terms, assurance of supplies, assurance of predictable pricing, and some volume that sets the expectations of the business relationship. Non-disclosure agreements are generally done earlier and repeated in the master agreements. Over time, the quality agreement and the MSA will often be integrated into a single document. Combined, they document the overall legal umbrella of the relationship that formed the foundation of the collaborative work of the parties involved. A compelling argument to begin looking at the master agreement sooner is if there is any restrictive intellectual property involved that may require a license now or in the future. This is vital to avoid any surprises after the investment of years of development work. Beginning work on a master supply agreement early can also provide an opportunity to document other currencies of the relationship. In other words, it's not just purchase orders you're placing for materials and the payment of the invoices. What else is being exchanged? Is the supplier getting an opportunity to test out new ideas or developments with your organization so you may both gain from their innovation? An MSA can help you define the access to science and controls for both parties, and you may also, as appropriate, define any exclusivity you might enjoy to provide a competitive advantage. Next slide. Performance scorecards. This is an area where I've often seen efforts go astray, with metrics being reported that are generally not that meaningful and interpretations often missing the point. At their foundation, performance scorecards should be a constructive statement of what's working and what isn't, so that there is a collective misunderstanding of the expectations and efforts focused to move in that direction. Simple metrics may be easy to generate, but they may not be worth even that limited effort and may even do harm. To borrow a quote from Albert Einstein, everything that can be counted does not necessarily count. Everything that counts cannot necessarily be counted. Scorecards can be and perhaps should be subjective. Their purpose is to provide speaking points at your next business review. Most of us in the cell and gene therapy space are not in a position to weigh one critical supplier against a competitor to guide a choice of sources. For any given material or service, we are quite often single or sole sourced and cannot easily move to another source. The scorecard needs to be used as a means to align expectations and focus where improvements will have the most benefit for both parties. Since you're not likely to find yourself using your scorecards to choose between suppliers, consider crafting your scorecards specific to the category of material or service you're procuring, or even make them specific to each supplier. Again, this is a tool to improve the relationship. Note also that if your scorecards are always reporting in the 95% to a 100% range, you're measuring the wrong things. You want to be defining where improvements can be made. You don't want to become complacent, so find out where the things can be better and put it on a scorecard and talk about it. Last, if metrics can drive continuous improvement, then why wouldn't we have our suppliers measure us as well? Consider actionable metrics for both parties and use them to drive improvement for both parties. Next slide. This is an example of a scorecard created using a spreadsheet. It provides some consistency in utilization. Note there are defined choices that help translate a subjective assessment into a value that can be summed up, but there's little value in doing so. The benefit of this scorecard is identifying the meaningful aspects of the relationship and looking at the performance in those areas. If both parties agree that performance could be better in a specific area, then resources can be focused on realizing that improvement. It is even more interesting when both parties did not see a low score coming. This is when a richer dialogue can be had regarding keeping a pulse on the business. And it also may be valuable to note from this example that you can also measure and discuss things like risk mitigation and business continuity plans. What is the supplier doing in the way of sustainable green practices or diversity and equity inclusion practices? It's again an opportunity to look at the overall relationship and not just what showed up at your dock recently. Next slide. Another important aspect of your scorecards is to gather input from other groups within your organizations. These are the people that might not make it to the business review, but nevertheless have a perspective on working with the supplier. Inquire with your inspection department how difficult is it for them to pull together the necessary documentation on a receipt from the supplier. How's the receiving department like the shipments that are coming in? And don't overlook the accounts payable department. How difficult is it to work with that supplier's invoices and what improvements could be made? Again, the corollary to that is, if the supplier is putting together a scorecard on you, they may be measuring how well you pay on time. These are the things to be discussing because in the development stage, you're not likely to be writing big checks to this supplier. You need to be performing as a customer that they want to work with.